7. The purpose of this tutorial video is to show you how to generate a new world in the game Dwarf Fortress. There's not going to be a lot of how-to in this tutorial, but rather there will be a lot of what is a new world in Dwarf Fortress and why do we want to create one? What's important about it? So when you create a new world in Dwarf Fortress, you're creating the setting where all of your games of Dwarf Fortress will take place. Oh, we need to look, before we start a new world, we're going to look at a world I've already created to give you an idea of what it is you're going to be creating. So you can play Dwarf Fortress or Adventurer in a world you've already created. And if you go to Legends, you'll see kind of the level of detail in which these worlds are generated. So in Legends, you can read about the history of the world that you've made in Dwarf Fortress. This game has an insane amount of depth. Right, so we have numbers. There are almost 22,000 historical figures alive in our world. There are 10,000 different sites. 90 legendary artifacts have been created. And you'll see that if we press enter on any of these, we'll get this list of historical figures. Anybody without a death date is still alive in our world, and we could run into them while we're playing the game. So let's go up and have a look at one of these dragons. So if we hit enter on the dragon, it gives us the entire history of the dragon. Right, one of the first of his kind. He settled in the odorous prairie in year 1 of our world. And then we have a whole history of everything that he's done, everyone that he's struck down and devoured. Other people who have fought with him and escaped. So this level of detail, this many lines of text, are generated for every historical entity when you create a world. It also makes maps done in its ASCII code that you can scoot around and investigate. It records history of an age of myth and an age of legends, and another age of myth and another age of legends. And all of these histories will update in the game while you're playing. So you send your dwarves to settle a fortress, and the artifacts that they create will be in this list of artifacts. And important events that happen to your dwarves will show up in the historical figures. And you're adding to this world. Then, if your fortress dies out to a horrible disaster, you can go in adventure mode and go see what kind of terrible creatures have occupied your old fortress. You can start a new fortress in the same world that will start, if you run your fortress for 50 years and you start a new fortress, it'll start 50 years later and start adding to that world history again. So there are a lot of rich stories in this world. I think the analogy I like to describe Dwarf Fortress is that Tarn and Zach Adams have created a fantasy setting that contains all of the detail of a rich fantasy novel, all of the world building, but there's no author who's taken and found the plot and the story of that world. And one of the great things about this game is if you head to the forums at bay12games.com, players write these stories set in the worlds that they generate in Dwarf Fortress. And that's one of the things that's kept me coming back and playing, is that you can read these stories and you can watch them unfold in your fortress. Um, and so it's about, to me, this game is about the stories, and it's about that depth and that richness of the universe that you're playing in. So we want to create a new world. All right, when you create a new world, it will give you some settings for world size. The Probably the most important of these settings is world size, and next to that, it's history. If you set your world size very large and your history very long, it will take the computer a long time to generate all of that history and store all of that. In the file that we saw was 125 years of history when we looked around in the legends. So you can see if we go to 1,050 years of history, it's going to take a long time to generate all of that. If you're just interested in poking around in this game and finding out what it's about, you might do a short or even a very short history and a pocket or a smaller world. If you want to generate a world after you've become a little bit more experienced with the game and you want to play through the lifetime of several fortresses and you want a rich history, you might make the world a little bit bigger and you might make the history a little bit longer. But for our purposes for the tutorial, we're just going to generate a pocket world with a short history so that the generation won't take a long time. These other settings are probably fine to leave on sparse for your first playthrough. Or leave on medium, leave on the defaults, medium or sparse on your first playthrough. We will probably make another more detailed tutorial about what each of these do. But for the purposes of this tutorial and for getting you started in the game, we're going to go pocket, short, and then medium, 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 sparse. Right? You'll notice behind me there's instructions for what the current keybinds for this screen are. That's a paradigm that you'll get used to playing this game. And on this screen, the key Y is what we press to go. And you'll see above my head that we just spammed through 125 years of history, generated some historical figures, killed some of them off, and our history has 7,258 events. And then over to the right-hand side of the screen is a map of our new world. We're on an island surrounded by water. Okay. You can press Enter to accept this world. You can press A to abort and make a new one. You can press P to export an image and info about the world. And you can use the movement keys to scan around and read the names of the different areas. So right now that blinking X is in the Bearded Swamp. If we move up onto these mountains, this is the Still Mountain, the Speechless Prairie, and all of the sites on the world will have those kinds of names. This Omega is a dwarven fortress. It'll tell us what that is. This Pi down here is a goblin fortress. So you can kind of scan around the map and see if it's set up a way you like before you decide to keep it. If this is your first playthrough, you probably just want to keep whatever map you get. And you can be a little bit more picky once you know what all this stuff is about. So we're going to hit Enter to accept this world. And now that our world is created, it takes us back to the main menu, and we can start playing. The world we just created was the second one, so we're going to go to Region 2. And we can choose between Dwarf Fortress and Adventurer mode. These tutorials are going to mostly be about Dwarf Fortress mode to begin with. We might make another series about Adventurer mode. So you can look at the legends for the new world you've created. It'll look a lot like the legends screen we were looking at the beginning of the tutorial. This one's a little bit shorter because I had a shorter history and a smaller world. But all of the pieces are there. And if you want to know about the different civilizations that you can choose from and embark. There's a lot of good information here. If you're playing for the story, you might poke around and learn some of that. So once you've finished creating your new world, you select Start Playing, press Enter, and you select the world you just created, press Enter, and you're going to choose Dwarf Fortress. That brings you to the Embark screen.